Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Cardano and its native token ADA, a realistic timeline. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. We also do have the ITC and ITC2 stake pools. I would encourage you to go earn rewards on your ADA by joining those stake pools. You can find information on how to do that in the description below at staking.intothe-cryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So ADA today is coming in at a very modest $2.28. Okay, $2.28. And of course, no one here is getting out of bed for a $2.20 ADA. And if you guys remember, back in January and February, I put out a realistic prediction for ADA, but I also said, hey guys, there's going to be periods of time where we go sideways for 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months. Back then, that was not a popular theory, of course, because we were just going straight up. But we can easily use prior market cycles and other cryptocurrencies to see that these things actually do play out. For instance, with Ethereum, we saw that happen with Ethereum. In the last cycle, there were two phases where we just went sideways for a long time. And you might look at this chart and say, well, Ben, this isn't really sideways, right? What are you talking about? This isn't sideways. But Ethereum just went up. Stop, right? No, because this range here, we're basically range bound for a year, a whole year. Over here, we were range bound for about half a year, okay? So when you look at a chart, you might be inclined to think, oh yeah, like it just went straight up. But when you actually look at these phases, there are long periods of sideways movement. And this is what we sort of speculated was going to happen with ADA after a crazy move up, and the idea that the cycle is gonna take even longer makes sense to get a long consolidation phase. You don't go from 2 cents to $2 and then continue higher, usually without proving to the market that $2 can be held, okay? When you go to these new milestones and new thresholds for these projects, the market has to accept it as the new normal, okay? There's a lot of buyers of ADA down here that maybe weren't buyers of it up here because, I mean, hell, they're up 100x, right? But the longer a project, just spins at a given region, it probably makes some sense to think, well, maybe the returns on this project aren't going to be as great as if you bought them down here. But that doesn't mean that it can't break out and give you another nice multiple, right? This is all a possibility, of course. And so this is something we want to talk about, right? We want to talk about, well, what is the timeline on ADA to actually see a breakout? Because we really haven't seen one so far. And if anything, you might say, well, we sort of already broke out, but then we came back down. One could argue that we saw something similar to Ethereum, right? I mean, it actually put in a new all-time high back in June after its first local high in March. But then it still came back down. And then, it looks kind of scary, but it actually dropped. When it dropped below the bull market support band, it fell another 50% or so. But then it went on another crazy rally. From this bottom here, it went up a very modest 6,800% before calming down for another half year. Okay, so when I look at ADA today, I see, okay, now it's at 227. No one cares about these prices, right? I mean, we've been at these valuations forever. But I look at this and say, well, when might we expect a breakout? Well, I guess one caveat to that is we are assuming that Bitcoin holds the line. And I mean, it has held the line so far. If you're not sure what I'm talking about with regards to Bitcoin and holding the line, I'm talking about over here where Bitcoin actually held the 20-week SMA, and you can even see it on, say, like the daily time frame. Bitcoin held the 20-week SMA. So far, Bitcoin looks pretty healthy, okay? Now, we should say that just because it went on a crazy rally last time without looking back doesn't mean it's going to do that this time. We would all love for that to happen. We also recognize, too, that another healthy way for the market to continue would be just subsequent tests of the 20-week to continue showing that there is support every 2 or 3 months. So we don't want to be too deterministic about anything, but so far, what have we done? We held the 20-week as support. We put in a new local high beyond what we did early in September. So far, Bitcoin looks great. So what is a realistic timeline for ADA? Well, the first caveat is Bitcoin continues to hold the line, okay? And you might say that's a cop-out, but again, Bitcoin controls the market. If Bitcoin dumps, the whole market's going to go with it. So it's the risks you take with ADA. It's the risks you take with altcoins. ADA is one of my favorite projects, and I told you guys back in 2019, I was loading up on it below 10 cents. A lot of people gave me a hard time about it back then. Here we are today at 227. And I'll say the same thing today. This is just long reaccumulation, in my opinion. It's just a really long accumulation. And if we sort of draw the lines in the sand to try to figure out where we're spending most of our time, it's in this region. So what's a theoretical timeline that might make sense? Okay, what is a theoretical timeline? And I'm not talking about a timeline to go back to $3. I'm talking about a timeline to break out to $5, okay? When could that move start? Not necessarily when will it end, when will we get to $5, but when could a move to a $5 ADA begin? When could it actually begin? And I think to really understand that, we should look at what happened last time with ADA. We should look at what's happened with Ethereum. We should try to understand what Bitcoin's doing. So again, if Bitcoin, we know the dominance usually goes up in Q4. If Bitcoin continues to do, right now it is having a nice little pullback, but again, it just rallied from 40K to 55K. Now it's at 53.6. So right, this is still fairly normal for Bitcoin to do. But the question is, how long are we going to spend over here? Well, first of all, I don't know if the bull market support band will hold. It ultimately depends on what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin continues to go up, I would speculate that this will hold, okay? If Bitcoin continues to rally, it's more likely than not that this will hold. If Bitcoin goes back down to test the bull market support band again in a month or two, then yeah, you could see this come back down, just like Ethereum did back over here in October through January of 2015 or 2016 and early 2017. So you could see something like that play out. But the argument is it might not matter, right? It might not change the timeline a whole lot. If you go look at what happened last year, ADA broke out from the bull market support band in mid to late November is when it started. So we may dubiously speculate that best case scenario, if Bitcoin does continue the rally after holding the 20-week moving average, then maybe mid-November is the time, the earliest we could see a rally take place. With the idea being that Bitcoin has a lot to prove still. We still want to see a new all-time high, and if Bitcoin does begin a rally, then that could be the exact time where a lot of altcoins lag behind it. Not necessarily that they outperform Bitcoin, but they could lag behind it at that phase, and it could Bitcoin could drag those altcoins up with it. So maybe mid-November would be the earliest I could see. Okay, so I would say for me, mid-November is really the earliest I could see a breakout happening. So I would say there. And again, I'm not talking about a breakout to $3. I don't think anyone cares about $3 at this point. I'm talking about a sustained move to, say, $5. When could that move occur? I think the earliest it could start, not finish, because it's going to take us a while to get to $5 whenever the move starts. I think the earliest it would start would be here, mid-November. But we also need to recognize, too, that this accumulation phase could last well beyond November. We saw with Ethereum, it started here in mid-February, mid to late February, and we didn't break out here until the following March. Okay? It's almost 13 months. If we were to apply that same principle to today and say, well, this was February, mid to late February, we might not see that breakout come until March of 2022. Okay? So when I think about how long could this long reaccumulation phase last, if I had to dubiously speculate, I would say the move to a new paradigm shift in what it means to hold one ADA would probably start somewhere in this region, somewhere between mid-November until mid-March. And maybe I should draw this out a little bit more. Let's say mid to late March, okay, before we would really see that move begin. So what could a move look like between now and then? Well, best case scenario would be ADA just says, to hell with Ben's prediction, right? To hell with Ben's prediction. He doesn't know what he's talking about, which there are times I certainly don't know what I'm talking about. We're just going to go straight up, right? Like there's nothing necessarily stopping it. That'd be the best case scenario. To hell with Ben's prediction is best case. I think a somewhat realistic scenario is to hold the bull market support band and maybe just kind of hang above it for a little bit, and then ultimately begin a breakout somewhere over here. That would sort of be a more realistic scenario, but still kind of optimistic. I'd still say that's still relatively optimistic. Doesn't mean it can't happen, and it's fine if you're a glass half full kind of person. Maybe that's how you see the world, right? You want to go with the most optimistic view. And it might look like, well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with saying we can't ride the 20-week here for a few weeks, maybe going in for another 4 or 5 weeks of holding the bull market support band as support, just like we did last September, October, and November, and then breaking out, okay? So this might be a more realistic scenario for an optimist. To take a more pessimistic view, what if Bitcoin still gives us a little bit of trouble for a few months and doesn't cooperate like we want it to, and maybe it goes back down to test the bull market support band in December rather than going parabolic, right? Well, there's always a chance that happens, and even if it does go back to test the bull market support band, we could always drop below this. Because remember, Ethereum dropped below the bull market support band in October of 2016, but the interesting thing with Bitcoin was if you go look at October of 2016, which is way back over here, Bitcoin held the line. Right? Bitcoin held the line. And in fact, if we look to see what happened back then, Bitcoin held the line in May, it came up in June, and then it just came right back down in August to hold the line through October again. And it was this pullback here that you could argue is what caused Ethereum to drop below the bull market support band. Okay, so what would that look like for Bitcoin? What would a more pessimistic view for ADA look like? Well, a more pessimistic view, but still realistically optimistic in the sense of Bitcoin holding the bull market support band, would be, okay, maybe it goes up for a little bit and then maybe it comes back down and then it holds the bull market support band again. But during this type of a move back down, ADA would likely drop below its own bull market support band, which, by the way, currently is coming in at a very modest 189 to 195. All right. So if that were to happen, rather than breaking out sometime over here, maybe it has to bleed down for a while, and then we break out later in Q1. So I look at this and say, I do believe that ADA will ultimately come out the other side. And I do think the rally will ultimately continue. I've given you my timeline on the general range at which that happens. In the past, I've put out, price predictions. This one's not even a price prediction. It's more just like a timeline of when a breakout could occur with ADA. So I think one of these two paths is the most likely, either Exhibit A or Exhibit B. A more unrealistic path that I think everyone would love and to cheer that Ben is wrong, and that's fine. I have my ADA position. Believe me, if it breaks out now, I'm not going to be upset at all. This will be a more unrealistic scenario. Especially, I think ADA has some work to do. There's some work to prove here. So I'm looking at mid-November through late March as the potential breakout point. That's what I'm looking at for ADA. And then if we were to talk about the bear case, well, the bear case is the market cycle peak for Bitcoin's already in, and all of this is just noise and redistribution and all that stuff. If that happens, then, that could get somewhat nasty, because then it just is going to do something like that. I hope that's not the case. I do believe there is overwhelming evidence to suggest that Bitcoin's market cycle peak is not 64K. I do not believe that is the market cycle peak. I think it has a ways to go beyond that. But to cover all bases and to show you that there are people that do believe that the market cycle peak is already in, if they're right, you need to understand the downside risk. So you certainly should not be betting the family farm by any stretch of the imagination. If that's the case and they're right and I'm wrong and all these other models are wrong and on-chain analysis is wrong, then yeah, I mean there is more downside risk. But I'm looking at it from my perspective and the models I'm looking at and what I believe Bitcoin is capable of doing. And I use those conclusions to try to figure out what I think A is going to do. I think we still have a few more weeks at the very least, but that doesn't mean we won't ultimately break out higher. So either Exhibit A or Exhibit B. Yeah, I mean, Exhibit B could get a little bit worse, right? I mean, it could always come down further beyond that. But something like this is, I think, a scenario if Bitcoin were to still give us some trouble. So I would look at this range right here for a potential move to the upside. Interestingly, if you go look at the ADA Bitcoin valuation, we're holding the line so far. This is where ADA held the line here, and third time, the fourth time. You could argue these are two separate times. Well, maybe not, but and then here as well. So this is an interesting area to see if ADA can continue holding the line against Bitcoin, especially with a fairly volatile Bitcoin. ADA ETH, it's been dropping recently, but I still have high hopes that it will continue to perform relatively well. And I mean, it's sort of in an uptrend here. Maybe we can take this off a log scale and see what it looks like. I've never really looked at this on a non-log scale, but we went below it here. But maybe this is the area to bounce relatively soon. If we want to be a little bit more conservative, maybe we look at it like that. Say, all right, I could come down a little bit more and maybe find some support at the prior local tops that we saw back in July of 2020, in April of 2019, and in April of 2018. So, with all that said, I hope this has been informative. We do have the premium list. Prices are going up on the premium list in about a week. So make sure you sign up, lock in the lower rate. If you sign up before that week, you get to lock in the lower rate. You'll get access to weekly reports and videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the Telegram chat room, the risk dashboard, the Cryptoverse app, and more. I put out tons of daily updates in the Telegram alerts channel. I think more than most people think I do, but I am really, really active there. So check it out, intothecryptoverse.com. If you're not staking your ADA, go do it with the ITC2 stake pool. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe, click the bell icon to turn on notifications, and I will see you next time. Bye.